Tell me, Apple, because it's got the most upside from here, or because it's got the least downside? Why is this a great idea?
I think it's a relative and absolute outperformer in this market, John. When you look at Apple, you've got the fortress balance sheet, which is clearly extremely important in this environment. But when you step back and look at the value proposition of Apple, it's really about product cycle innovation, which we think still remains on track. We think it's about a stable replacement cycle, which I also think remains on track. And so lastly, it's bolstered by services growth, which in fact is seeing a little bit of an uptick given the fact that more people are staying at home. So the net of it is, yes, there is going to be a real shock to demand in 2Q. We know that. We cut our numbers quite aggressively for the second quarter. But as you look out over the next year, really the $17 of earnings that people were expecting before is translating maybe to $16 of earnings. But the multiple has compressed from north of 20 times to 15 times X cash, which is a huge disconnect between where the earnings power stands. But the temporary dislocation just gives you an excellent opportunity to own the stock.
Now, Wamsi, Apple has just this practice of having a tick-tock cycle in iPhone releases. We expect a 5G iPhone this year, but if there's ever been a reason for Apple to call an audible, it's here. Is it a bad thing if Apple does not release the phone that so many anticipate this year, instead decides to lower prices, wrap in component costs, maybe improve margins, and let things ride for another cycle?
Yeah, John, look, I mean, that's fairly unprecedented, right? So when you look at the functionality of the phone, there's been significant improvement over the years. It's basically become something that's fairly indispensable for people. Now, when you look at the cycle itself, what is the implication if Apple actually delays the cycle for whatever reason that it might? The worst case situation is that 5G gets delayed by another year. Frankly, Foxconn just came out and said that that's not likely to happen. But in the event that it actually happened, you have 1 year delay in sort of the big earnings uptick. You don't get from $11 number in calendar 20 to a $16 number. You'll get to a $14 number. And then the following year, you get to a $16 number. So in the bigger scheme of things, is it a absolute disaster if it gets delayed? No, it's not. I mean, it delays the recovery in the stock and the upside becomes a little more muted in the near term. But all that said and done, the decision that Apple's really going to make is it going to be on time to release a product that's really going to have all the feature functionality that is attractive? Is it got everything that meets its specification? Is it good in quality standards? Once you hit all those metrics, then Apple will release its product. I think from a pricing standpoint, the discussion is always open to play around with pricing. We've seen some cycles where Apple has taken up the pricing, and then the subsequent cycle it brought down. Now, when you incorporate something as game-changing as 5G in the phone, more likely than not, there will be a slight uptick in pricing given the component costs that are involved. As far as the supply chain goes, the supply chain recovery has actually really come on very, very strongly. What started out like 2 months ago as a supply problem has really translated into a demand problem now. So we think that the supply side is good. We're expecting the normal cadence. If at all there is a delay, we just think it limits the near-term upside on the name.
Yeah, you do have to wonder, though, Wamsi, whether we're going to see more supply chain diversification in general from a company like Apple, given this situation once we come through the other side of it. On top of everything we saw last year with the trade war and tariffs. In the meantime, Apple has been a massive buyer of its own stock. I mean, we've seen stock buyback programs that have been halted right now in the midst of all this uncertainty and everything around COVID-19. Do you think that the company is going to continue to buy its own stock right now?
Yeah, we absolutely think so, Morgan. So when you look at Apple, I mean, it's in this envious position of having gone through last quarter, buying back more stock, but its free cash flow, frankly, exceeded even what it bought back. So to try to get to a net cash neutral position is going to take it 3 to 4 years. We don't really expect a significant pause in buying back stock. I mean, it has the capital to deploy both on buying back stock as well as doing everything else and all the social good that it's actually doing in terms of providing all the masks to people, over 10 million or so, and every other way that Apple is known and, frankly, is such a good social player in the market. We think that, it is going to continue to buy back from a capital deployment standpoint. And on your supply chain comment, Morgan, I would just add that, look, I mean, you've had We've actually written about this for a long time. We called it Gamma, Get America Manufacturing Again. This is one of those elements where, this is the impetus for changing the dynamics of where things are made. And for that, you require really design changes, design process changes, system in chip sort of solutions that can be manufactured and assembled, and sort of split the supply chains across the East and the West. We think that this is yet another catalyst. I mean, the trade war was the first catalyst, and you saw some supply chain stuff move out of China. Mass manufacturing obviously has not yet done that. But I think on the electronics industry, there is a future where you could see that there is a decoupling of these two supply chains.